Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening to all of you. We're pleased to welcome you here today. We're pleased to welcome you here today to the federal candidates debate. Thank you to all of you for being here for what will be a very important process. My name is Keith Mwanzia, and I'm the President and CEO of the Guelph Chamber of Commerce. And I'm thrilled to welcome you here this evening as we delve into the issues that will be important for our future. To begin, we will, of course, thank our partners here at the Cotton Club for hosting us. I'm sure that you can see that us being at capacity is a good thing and demonstrates an engaged community. As well, we're pleased to be joined by the Guelph and District Association of Realtors and Rogers TV. Please join me in thanking our partners. This will indeed be a debate like none other. Our debate format has been recalibrated to ensure that we're able to allow for maximum participation and debate by the candidates as well as participation from yourselves. So first and foremost, I hope that you are well aware that as you came in, you were all handed a question sheet. Please submit your questions in written format that way. As well, if as you came in you didn't receive your question sheet, or you do have, or you disregarded your question sheet and you would like to ask a question, please just raise your hand and we'll be happy to provide you with a question sheet. Once you do have your question, again, raise your question and we will ensure that we take it and have it submitted for the portion where we'll be asking audience questions. These questions will, of course, be posed by myself after they're vetted through our vetting table. Candidates will have the opportunity for opening remarks. These remarks will last 1.5 minutes in length. We will then move on to a candidate-specific question, and this will feature a question specific to the platforms that the parties have released. The other three candidates will be given 30 seconds to respond or debate. After all three candidates have responded, then the first candidate will have 30 seconds to respond or rebuttal. We will then move into the presentation of themes. This will provide the opportunity for the candidates to engage each other and juxtapose the policy positions of their parties against one another. This section of debate will be a candidate-to-candidate open debate around a specific theme and will run for 1.5 minutes. There will feature approximately 6 themes. We will then move into submitted questions, and the candidates will have an opportunity to answer all the questions asked. Candidates will be given 30 seconds to answer the questions, and the order will be, of course, determined on a rotating basis by myself. The questions asked tonight have come from members of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as, of course, yourselves and the public at large. Last but, of course, not least, we will invite the candidates to offer a closing statement of 1 minute each in the reverse order for which they have for which they opened their remarks. Candidates were invited to draw on a first-come, first-served basis, and that will be reflected in the way that they begin their opening remarks. Now, of course, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeff Morley, President of the Guelph and District Association of Realtors. I'd like to invite him up to introduce our candidates so we can begin our debate.
Thank you, Kithio. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Guelph and District Association of Realtors. And this evening, it's my honor to introduce tonight's candidates. I will be introducing them in the number drawn. So to my right, we have Gloria Kovach, the Conservative Party of Canada. And then we have Mr. Andrew Seagram, the New Democratic Party of Canada. To my left, we have Gord Miller, who is the Green Party of Canada. And finally, Mr. Lloyd Longfield, the Liberal Party of Canada. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night, and good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, of course, we will begin with the first candidate, Gloria Kovach, your introduction.
From the beginning of this campaign, I said that you matter, Guelph matters. The person you choose to represent you matters. Tonight, you're going to hear my candidates speak about how they want to represent you, how they're not going to be whipped by their party if they get to Ottawa. What I think you'll find tonight is that they're already there, and that's where I'm different. For 24 years, I was a Guelph City Councillor. During that time, I represented all the residents of our city, regardless of their political affiliation, and worked to bridge the gaps for the betterment of Guelph. During that time, I represented all residents of our city. I'm not an unknown commodity. I'm known for speaking my mind, for doing what is best for my constituents, and for being a compassionate and experienced voice at the table. As a country, we're facing serious challenges that will require collaboration and cooperation between all levels of government. As a past president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I have an unparalleled understanding of these relationships. I don't need party policy to tell me how to listen to my constituents. The discussion tonight should be about Guelph, about creating local jobs, about being leaders on the world stage, about having safe and prosperous families, because that's Guelph, and Canada needs a little Guelph.
Before we do move on, I will share with the audience that in order to ensure that we get all of the commentary in and all of the debate to happen, that we ensure that our cheering and clapping and support is tempered so that we can offer the opportunity for real debate. Next, we'll go to Andrew Seagram, who will do his introduction.
Good evening, and thank you to the Guelph Chamber of Commerce and the Cut and Fields for having us here tonight for this important all-candidates debate. I am Andrew Seagram, and I am the candidate for the NDP. I've been a social activist and a community development person for a decade here in Guelph, and I've been a poverty activist for 30 years. I've worked on the front lines of people with street kids and homelessness and youth, and I have a very excellent understanding of what's going on for people out there. Guelph is a great city, and I'm honored to be sitting here with you and participating in the democratic process. A democratic process that has time been tested, particularly during the last election, with the robocall scandal and other dirty tricks. And when in Ottawa, I will continue to pursue answers to that appalling attack on our democracy. The NDP has been working to help middle class and the most vulnerable Canadians for decades. And when elected, we will continue to work to ensure all Canadians are moving forward with a greater prosperity, a cleaner environment, and a Canada that is a global leader. The NDP fam stands firm on its commitments. Unlike the Liberals at times, we have a policy that we've been espousing for years and stand behind. $15 a day daycare, $15 an hour federal minimum wage, proportional representation, and balanced budgets. These are promises we make to Canadians and that we're going to keep. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Gord Miller from the Green Party.
Thank you, and thanks for all coming out here tonight. I'm going to focus on the Green Party platform. The Green Party platform is focused on true prosperity. True prosperity is well-being shared by all in the community. It's based on 4 basic concepts. Sustainable economy. So things like a focused economy on clean technology, on manufacturing, on sustainable agriculture, about investing in skills and education for our youth, and energy efficiency, without excess student debt, by the way. We will make serious and predictable investments in infrastructure. The second pillar is good government. We want to end first past the post voting, just like the NDP. We want to repeal Bill C-51. We want to overhaul the immigration and refugee policy, cut the budget of the Prime Minister's office to make Parliament work better, and restore the dignity of members of Parliament. The third pillar is strong communities. We want a national senior strategy, including housing plan, home care, improved CPP, a national housing strategy to reduce homelessness, a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians, a high quality of childcare available for those who want it. And lastly, bold action on climate change. We want to eliminate fossil fuel use by mid-century, implement a fee and dividend system to reduce greenhouse gases, eliminate fossil fuel subsidies, and re-engage the international community in working for solutions for climate change. Thank you.
And Lloyd Longfield from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you, Keithio, and thank you everyone for being here. Where is Canada after 10 years of Conservative rule? We're in our second recession in 7 years. Our aging infrastructure is crumbling. Harper has dismissed the environment. Our retirement age has gone from 65 to 67. Seniors are concerned about their pension, and veterans have been abandoned. When you have an economy that works for the middle class, you have a country that works for everyone. To create good-paying jobs and improve the life of Canadians, now is the time to invest in our people and our infrastructure, not later. Stephen Harper thinks this is the best we can do. The NDP is following his economic plan, saying one thing in English and something else in French. I'm running a local campaign with local people to be the local voice in Ottawa. I'm committed to representing Guelph in Ottawa, not the other way around. As a result, I only take campaign pledges from my fellow Guelphites. Will the other candidates join me in a commitment to only take local contributions? We have to stop Harper with a seat in Guelph.
Okay, now we will move into the candidate-specific questions, and we will keep strict to time. There will be that 30-second which I outlined before, and then even as we move into the themes and the audience-submitted questions, we will keep strict to time so that we're able to cover the full breadth of the issues. We will start. Okay. Well, one moment. Technical difficulties. I can always hear myself up here. Let's get that as loud as possible if we could. Okay. Okay. So can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me now? Excellent. We will begin with a Conservative candidate and a candidate-specific question. The Conservative Party has committed to introduce a tax lock law, as well as introduced balanced budget legislation. The experience with both approaches in other jurisdictions has been poor. Given this scenario, how will this approach be effective? Gloria Kovach, 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, we have balanced the budget, and while opposition parties have threatened deficits and massive tax hikes, we have budgeted to account for the weakness in our economy. We have cut taxes. We've cut taxes $6,600 in tax cuts per family since the Conservatives were first elected, and we have a formal pledge for no new taxes. We have added $1.3 million $3 million in net new jobs, and we have pledged to add another $1.3 million by 2020. We have a record of investment in infrastructure, lowering taxes, balancing the budget, supporting growth in the manufacturing sector. The global economy remains fragile, and it's due to forces beyond our borders. We've got the global oil crisis, we've got European debt crisis, and we've got China's economic slowdown, which is all impacting our economy. What we don't need is higher debt policies.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Thank you, Ms. Kovach. 30 seconds to Mr. Seagram.
Well, the NDP aren't calling for a massive tax increase. We're calling for a 2% tax increase on big business and corporations, and we're lowering taxes on small business. But the question to hand, which you didn't answer, is about balanced budget legislation. It's dangerous because it limits the capacity for any government and any organization to be able to have a fluctuating fiscal and monetary policy. You have to be able to borrow when you need to borrow. I'm trying to speak as loud as I can. But no, and a tax lock situation is a dangerous idea as well. Now my time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. We'll be sure to catch up on that time. Over to you, Mr. Miller. One moment before we start the clock again. I want to ensure that our audio is that we can hear all of our candidates on stage, and we can hear myself as the moderator up here. So we're going to do a mic check. Can we hear in the back? Ms. Kovach, can we do a mic check on you?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Seagram, can we do a mic check on you?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Miller?
Everybody vote green.
And Mr. Longfield, let's do a mic check on you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. I trust that we'll be able to proceed without any audio issues. We have the assurance of our tech that we'll be able to proceed without audio issues. We're now moving on to Mr. Miller for 30 seconds in response to the question related to the Conservatives' commitment to a tax lock law and balanced budget legislation. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Miller.
Okay, we will increase taxes on large corporations. The Conservatives have cut the taxes on large corporations down to half what they are in America. They're ridiculously low, and the corporations are hoarding the cash. They're not reinvesting. This policy of cutting taxes to big corporations and they're going to trickle down and reinvest is just not working. We're not afraid of taxing corporations and putting the money back into communities, into small business, into other things that build our communities. That's where the future of Canada lies. It's in manufacturing, it's in agriculture, not in protecting corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Longfield.
This is where the Liberal Party distinguishes itself from the other parties, where we're asking the top 1% of earners in Canada to give a little more so that we can have a 7% tax reduction for people in the mid-range between $44,000 and $89,000. We want to invest in infrastructure to create the good jobs we need in our communities, and with those tax breaks, we can then stimulate the economy beyond the 0.7% growth we're now seeing.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Rebuttal from you, Ms. Kovach.
Thank you. Both the Liberals and the NDP are pledging to raise taxes on families, seniors, and small business. This will kill jobs, destabilize the economy by threatening to unbalance the budget. Lloyd, you propose $30 billion in deficits. You might want to burden your grandchildren. I don't want to burden mine.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. We'll now move on to the NDP-specific question. The NDP has stated that it will introduce a cap-and-trade system to reduce emissions. What will the impact of this system be on the manufacturing industry?
The cap-and-trade system is the best system that we can have in order to regulate emissions, carbon emissions in Canada. What it does is it legislates a top grill so that people cannot go beyond that. Other parties have other ideas. But what it'll do for manufacturing is it's going to create innovation. It's going to have people figuring out how to work and create new industry within the confines of the reality of what we have to live within in our emissions and within the environment that we're living in. We have to have a sustainable economy, and we have to do that effectively. A cap-and-trade system is a system that's working globally, or working in other regions around the globe, and that we can maintain it and we can build a strong economy with it. We look at creating other manufacturing sectors, solar panels, solar energy. We look at conservation, all kinds of different things, but it's a powerful tool.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Miller.
Well, we prefer a fee and dividend system to cap and trade. Cap and trade is good for big industry and big emitters, but fee and dividend is a system that covers the wide range of greenhouse gases in society. What does it mean? Well, we put a fee or a charge on things that cause emissions of greenhouse gases. We collect all the money and give it all back to people equally on Canadian citizens over 18, so it comes back as a dividend. The government doesn't keep any of the money, but it gives an incentive for people who are emitting greenhouse gases to stop emitting them, because that costs them money.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Longfield for 30 seconds.
The NDP and Green are telling provinces what to do. Liberal government sees some provinces having success and others that haven't picked up the ball yet, but we all need to have a national strategy to fight climate change. Targets will be set by the federal government, incentives will be put in place, and then we'll negotiate with the provinces to come up with the best solutions to reach the targets within their areas. Negotiating, collaboration is what the Liberal Party is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Ms. Kovach.
Thank you. We're the first government in Canadian history to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we've done so while protecting the Canadian economy and Canadian jobs. The NDP plan is put forward by a group of extremists that would cripple the economy, raise the price of consumer goods, and put hundreds of thousands of Canadians in the energy sector out of work. Our government has reduced emissions without harming the economy and without a national carbon tax.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Over to you, Mr. Seagram, for closing.
The Conservatives have not lowered greenhouse gas emissions in North America. Let's get that straight and clear. It's just unbelievable that was just stated. The fee and dividend system, you cannot tax carbon emissions away. And that's what the fee and dividend system is doing. You're just putting money into the system. We've seen with a $100 barrel of oil, people are still using gas. It's still in astronomical numbers. We have to actually regulate and regulate a cap so that people have to work within it.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. We will move on to the Green Party specific question. The Green Party has indicated its intention to raise corporate taxes over 4 years to 19%. From the current 15%, what will the short and long-term effects of this increase be on our local businesses?
Well, our local businesses, first of all, most of them are small businesses, and we're not raising a tax on them. We're lowering it to 9%, as most of the parties have agreed to do. The effect on our large businesses won't be very much, because right now they're hoarding the cash, as I've said. It's moving to 19%. It still puts us in the middle of the OECD countries. It's not excessively high. It's way less than the United States. It's enough to give us some cash to make some changes and keep the government more viable, and it will not hurt these large mega corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Longfield for 30 seconds.
Raising corporate taxes will put 150,000 jobs at risk in Canada. Lowering taxes on the small and medium-sized businesses that we have in Guelph from 11% to 9% will stimulate jobs. So the Liberal Party is looking at how do we stimulate jobs by focusing on where jobs are created. The other areas we're looking at is reducing EI so that there's more money in the businesses to stimulate that part of their business as well.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Ms. Kovach for 30 seconds.
Well, the Liberal, federal Liberal EI plan is going to cost us an extra $2 billion. So I don't think that's a very good thing for corporations at all. The tax, you know, it's just going to kill jobs. It's going to destabilize our economy, and it's not good for business. It's not good for jobs. It's counterproductive for Canadians, and it's clearly not what I'm hearing when I'm going door to door.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Mr. Seagram.
The NDP is going to raise corporate taxes to 2 points. It is not going to impinge on business practices. I think, as we've already heard, yes, there's massive amounts of money out there. There's billions and billions of dollars in the banks that they're not lending and loaning out. There's billions and billions in corporate dollars that are just sitting there that need to be brought out, and they need to either reinvest it themselves or need to be nudged to do so, and that's the power of government.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Miller, to close this.
Lloyd, we agree. We're lowering the business tax, create real jobs, absolutely. And Gloria, I have no idea what doors you're knocking on that are telling you that they want to hear the corporate taxes are lowered, because they're certainly not the doors that I'm knocking on. Maybe we're in different neighborhoods.
Thank you. Thank you for closing out that particular subject matter. Now we'll go to Mr. Longfield with the Liberal-specific question. With the many areas that the Liberal Party has committed to, how would a Liberal government restrain program spending, manage growth in the bureaucracy, and ensure that there isn't increased red tape? 1 minute to you, Mr. Longfield.
Reducing program spending, one program spend that hits you in the face every time you turn on the TV or radio, $750 million a year being spent on partisan advertising by the Conservative Party. We would immediately reduce or eliminate the $750 million being spent by making partisan advertising illegal in Canada. Also, And we're also looking at things like the stimulus package that you have to put billboards that cost $30 million across the country to, again, say, this is the job we're doing. Well, that's the job you're supposed to do. You're the government of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Ms. Kovach for 30 seconds.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So let's pause the clock. So the question is, with the many areas that the Liberal Party has committed to, how would a Liberal government restrain program spending, manage growth in the bureaucracy, and ensure that there isn't increased red tape? So to you for 30 seconds.
Well, they can't. That's the answer. So they're not looking at reducing red tape, and our government is committed to actually reducing red tape. So what we have committed to is for every new law we bring in, we reduce 2. So we're reducing it, making it simpler for small business, making it simpler for applications for immigrants, making it simpler for Canadians. So that's what we're committed to doing. You know, it's interesting when you talk about partisan that Lloyd even paraded Kathleen Wynne through Guelph.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. To the audience, I will ask for a decorum. Let's not shout, yell, or heckle at the candidates. We're here to engage in a dialogue on the issues. Being able to support them with mild applause is something that is entirely welcome. But if we're going to be able to have a meaningful discussion about the important issues important to our community, let's ensure that we're doing so with a meaningful decorum. So to you, Mr. Seagram, on that particular point, go ahead and share that one if you'd like.
Yeah, okay.
To you, Mr. Seagram, for 30 seconds on that question.
Okay, thank you. I just do have to comment on lowering red tape for immigrants. We need to see more immigrants coming in, more refugees coming in, and we have to reach out a helping hand to everyone that is in need of help right now. So the Conservative government hasn't been doing that. The NDP is a program-oriented government. There's no doubt we're looking at creating new programs for people, but not with red tape, making it easy and accessible. We don't want a Brazil-like government that we've seen.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Over to you, Mr. Miller. Over to you, Mr. Miller, for 30 seconds. Same question.
Well, we have a different approach entirely to taxation and approach the government, and it's hard to comment on what the Liberals are doing. We want to reduce red tape, but we want to focus taxation on pollution, on bad things, and relieve the taxation on good things like earning income. So it's an entirely different approach.
And thank you, Mr. Miller. And over to you, Mr. Longfield, to close out on this subject matter.
When you look at red tape, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been saying for years that we have to reduce red tape to improve competitiveness. For years, we have more red tape every year on small businesses and large businesses. In order for us to be globally competitive, we need to streamline the system. We need to see action on it. We've been waiting 10 years and we've seen nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. So we've now come to the conclusion of our candidate-specific questions related to their platforms. We're now going to move into the themed question portion of this debate. And just a reminder that this will be a 1.5-minute timed experience, and this will be a candidate-to-candidate engagement. We will begin our first candidate-to-candidate engagement with the Liberal candidate, Mr. Longfield, and the Conservative candidate, Ms. Kovach. We will enforce our time quite strictly. I asked of the candidates the same challenge I put to our audience, that we offer a level of decorum and we don't speak over each other and follow the moderator's instructions as carefully as you can. On the first subject matter, the economy. There are a number of tools that the federal government can utilize when it comes to providing support for business and fostering an environment for job growth. How does your party's plan specifically address this? I put this to you two.
Immediately, we'd be introducing infrastructure spend on municipalities like Guelph, where we have projects that need federal, provincial, and municipal support in order for them to be viable.
Well, it's good that you said that, Lloyd,
will be created through Conestoga College and the University of Guelph.
Okay.
Those jobs will be created through the University of Guelph, Conestoga College, and the Guelph business community.
Ms. Kovach, go ahead.
Well, as president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, actually, I was the person that negotiated the infrastructure funding for municipalities with our government. We made it permanent.
But
we doubled it, we indexed it, and we made it sustainable.
When you were on city council,
and
you were
that's
the
what
only one that voted against increases in infrastructure. As the Chamber of Commerce, we were trying to get infrastructure funding. FCM was wanting infrastructure funding, and yet you voted against it.
No, that's actually not true. So Lloyd, actually, you call yourself an advocate for small business and entrepreneurs, and now you want to raise their taxes. And I'm not quite sure where you stand, Lloyd. You call them tax cheats, but you were the head of Chamber of Commerce, and yet you sent emails that I have here to the city that promotes 0% increase, and you've got emails to me saying you need to lessen debt and find efficiencies. So are you speaking for business, Lloyd, or are you speaking for the Liberals?
We're looking at closing $500 million a year in tax loopholes that the top 0.1%, 70% of them use tax-free dividends to split income. Those are the loopholes. That's not small business.
Thank you.
That's fake business.
That's time to the two of you. Thank you for a very meaningful exchange. To the NDP and to the Green Party, again, same question on the economy. There are a number of tools that the federal government can utilize when it comes to providing support for business and fostering an environment for job growth. How does your party's plan specifically address this?
Who starts? Anyway, let's go.
This is 1 minute and 30 seconds. Each of you are able to engage. If you'd like to engage first, go right ahead, Mr. Miller.
Well, ours is focused on community-based job development. We're looking at supporting young people by moving money to municipalities to hire young people for environment and social functions. We're investing in education, removing the tuition off university students and college students. It's a matter of pouring the money back and invigorating communities at that level. And I don't think we differ a whole lot. What do you think?
Not entirely, but what we're also looking at is, I think our plan is better. I think what we're looking at is innovation fund for manufacturing. We're looking at supporting and lowering small business taxes by 2% because small businesses are the core and the rock of the core and the rock of the economy.
So what? Perhaps we can actually dig deep into what the differences are between your two policies when it comes to the economy. I recognize that you have lots of similarities, as you both stated.
We don't believe in cap and trade, or we believe in cap and trade. We don't believe in tax and fee.
I think the focus has got to be back. It's not on big corporations, not on multinationals. It's not exporting bitumen. It's focused back on the community and in manufacturing and clean technology. That's where the opportunities for Guelph and for Canada are.
And we're talking about putting in billions and billions of dollars into infrastructure spending as well over a period of 20 years.
And we'll put in 1% of GST for $6 billion of regular funding long term.
Thank you to the two of you. Now, why don't we explore a little bit on the same question in terms of the tools that can be used, and why don't we juxtapose the Liberal proposal to the Green Party's proposal? So, Mr. Longfield and Mr. Miller, to what extent do your proposals provide a meaningful opportunity for fostering an environment for job growth and for support for the business for businesses? What specifically will your plans be able to address this? I know that Mr. Miller opened in the last exchange, so why don't we have Mr. Longfield open, and you can jump in as he proceeds. So, Mr. Longfield.
Interesting format. I used to moderate debates that were a little bit more structured and great dialogue and great interactions. What we're looking at is investing in innovation that creates jobs as well. So $1.3 billion going into skills development that we can get young people into jobs, reduce the 13% youth unemployment rate, and get people creating businesses in our community that stimulate jobs growth as well.
I think the big difference, Lloyd, between there are several differences. What we agree on the small business tax, we agree on the same number. We agree on putting money into employing youth. Where we differ, I think, is on infrastructure spending. We're talking about taking 1% of GST and putting it in place so there's no stop and go. It's no more, we have to hold this project waiting for a federal approval of funds. No, so $6 billion a year. It's there all the time. Plan for it long term, guaranteed.
So that's a major policy difference.
One of our policy around infrastructure spend has $20 billion going into a green infrastructure fund that'll be used for municipal water treatment, wastewater treatment, and alternate energy systems. So something that the Liberal Party wants to do to create green jobs, jobs like we've created in Guelph in the last year.
We have a Green Jobs Fund as well, but it's just structured slightly differently. But the big thing between the Greens and the Liberals is that we are not focused on large corporations. We are focused on communities and small business in the future of Canada. You guys are married to the corporations.
We're focused on all business.
Thank you to the two of you for that. Next, we will have the NDP and the Conservatives engage in what specific policy measures you plan to engage in, should you be government, that will be able to spur job growth or spur an environment that allows for job growth and supports economic prosperity.
Small business represents about 99% of all our Canadian businesses, and about 70% of the people employed in the public sector are employed by small businesses. So we're going to reduce the small business tax from 11% to 9% to promote growth and expansion in jobs. And, quite frankly, anyone who's ever lived through an NDP-governed province knows how quickly the NDP government can cripple the economy.
That is the most incredibly bizarre thing I've ever heard. NDP governments have had the most balanced budgets of any governments in Canadian history. They have. Tommy Douglas, 17 straight-up balanced budgets in a row.
Bob Rae.
Yeah, Bob Rae. We all heard about Bob Rae 25 years ago, and he's a Liberal now, right?
Without us delving...
But he's not a conservative.
Yeah, well, he will be.
Without us delving into a history lesson, I haven't heard any. And if we could stop the clock for a moment, I haven't heard any specific policy proposals that you are offering. Ms. Kovach spoke to a specific tax measures. How does your plan differ when it comes to specific tax measures that would be able to spur job growth?
Well, we're also going to lower the small business tax from 11 to 9%. We're going to have a $40 million tax credit for businesses that invest in machinery, equipment, and property used in innovative research. We're going to support local farmers, and we're going to support farming. We're going to take it back, and we're going to make sure that we have a whole agenda on food and local farming, and make sure also that we have research going on at the University of Guelph that's publicly based and not corporate based, so that we get people actually doing stuff. So we're out there, and we're going to
Thank you, Mr. Seagram.
You're welcome.
We will now get into you won't get a very big rest, but we'll soon have you up and running again. Mr. Longfield and Mr. Seagram, I think that there's a very important question about the policy specifics that you might engage in that differ from one another. I think you've had the opportunity to talk about how your policy measures or your party's policy measures differ from Ms. Kovach's and from Mr. Miller. Now would like to give you the opportunity to be able to have that exchange with Mr. Seagram. So Mr. Seagram finished us off last time. We'll go into a minute 30 on this. What specific policy measures would you introduce that would spur job growth and economic prosperity that differentiates you from the NDP?
From the Liberals?
Thanks, Keith. I'm starting to get the rhythm of things, so it takes a little while, but I'm catching on where we're heading with this. I mentioned the $1.3 billion that we have that we're going to be spending on youth jobs. It's 13 times more than what the NDP is proposing. Our goal is to create 40,000 youth jobs every year to try to attack not only the unemployment rate, but to get the youth active in the economy, purchasing houses. Affordable housing is another part of our infrastructure plan, to create affordable housing within communities, to create more rental units with stimulus on rental units, so that instead of having student debt, they come out with a job and creating income.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram.
Our plan for students, if we're going to go to students, is resoundingly great. What we do is we will send funds directly to universities and colleges to allow for tuitions to be lowered. We will get rid of unpaid internships for students. That's basically slavery. People are working, they should be paid, especially when students are coming out after massive debt we're dealing with. I was talking to a student the other day who said that he's not going to law school because he can't afford it, and he's a brilliant kid, and that's got to stop. That's appalling. So what we'll also do is we'll create a $160 million four-year fund to help small and medium-sized aerospace companies, for example. That's just part of what we're going to do. We're going to build the economy and get people working.
So I think what we'll do is place 30 seconds onto the clock, because both of you have addressed students in the community, which are a very important part of our community, and you've spoken specifically to how you plan to provide some relief for them in some fashion. Granted, Ms. Longfield, you spoke to post-graduation, but Mr. Seagram, you made specific reference to a reduction of tuition through transfers to the institutions. Given our constitutional framework and how education is funded, to what extent would a proposal like that be able to work? And Mr. Longfield, given that the federal government does not control things like interest rates, to what extent would people be able to engage in purchases of homes that quickly post-graduation? So we'll put 30 seconds back onto the clock, and we'll get you to dig a little bit deeper on this because of how important it is to our community. We'll start with you, Mr. Longfield, because Mr. Seagram finished us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mwanzia. Two levels to this. I think you've separated into two questions. One is in terms of interest rates, and I would be advocating for interest-free loans for students to have tuition and living costs paid for through an interest-free loan, so that they can pay back over time after they graduate. And in 15 seconds, it's pretty hard to get the rest of the question addressed.
That's okay, well done, but we'll go 30 seconds to you, Mr. Seagram, on that specific policy matter related to reduction of tuition.
Reduction in tuition and transfer, well, it'll be a negotiation with the provinces, but it would be about funds directly to universities and colleges to be able to make sure that tuition can be lowered for students. People, particularly in Ontario, it'll affect Guelph incredibly. You know, kids are literally leaving school, as we all know, with thousands and thousands of dollars of debt, and they're stressed out of their minds and they can't find work. And there's not going to be, we're going to build work, but there's also a bubble at the top where the baby boomers are just clinging on for dear life in the employment world, and it's a challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Our last exchange on this particular subject matter will be between Ms. Kovach and Mr. Miller. So specifically, what are the specific proposals within your party's platform to spur job growth and economic prosperity, and how do those differ between the two of your parties? And we'll start with you, Ms. Kovach.
We are committed to expanding small business. We're reducing the small business tax from 11% to 9%, and I think that's grossly different from what my colleague is proposing.
No, it's exactly the same.
With,
in fact, all four of us have the same plan.
Mr. Miller,
if you were listening, you would have caught on to that.
Mr. Miller, let's make sure that we have a meaningful exchange here. Over to you, Ms. Kovach, for the next 15 seconds.
Mr. Miller, I couldn't get over your increased taxes overall for Canadians, so I guess I didn't read your party's policy. So we are investing. We've promised, we have delivered on 1.3 million new jobs in our economy, and we have committed to 1.3 million more by 2020.
Okay, you want the specifics.
Let's get into the specifics, Mr. Miller.
A Canadian Sustainable Generations Fund targeted at youth and sustainable generation. A national sustainable jobs plan to invest in well-paying local sustainable jobs. A community environmental service corps where we give money to municipalities if they hire youth and subsidize the wages of youth in environment and community service jobs. These are the kind of things immediately short-term. And no, Gloria, we're not going to raise taxes on Canadians. We're going to raise taxes on major corporations, your friends. So I can see why you're upset about that.
So if you're going to talk about youth, I think we need to talk about the benefits that we have for loans, for interest-free for a period for technical training.
And we're going to eliminate tuition.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That brings us to a close of our first theme. I know that both of you will have the opportunity for additional engagements as we continue through this. Well done to the candidates, well done to the audience and the management of this theme-based approach. We're going to keep digging deep onto the specifics that the candidates can offer that make sure that your questions are answered in this regard. Let's move on to skills development. There was a lot of talk about skills development. There's a lot of talk about how important it is There was talk about a lot of university, but as we know, there's also the need for both apprenticeships and skills training. And so we'll begin with this. The first exchange is between the NDP and the Greens. Mr. Seagram, Mr. Miller, you will be first up on this particular subject matter. And for you to be able to frame this, it is according to the Guelph Business Expansion and Retention Survey, 69% of local manufacturers require enhanced employee training in order to expand. If elected, what will your party's strategy on skills development be? And that is to you, Mr. Seagram and Mr. Miller. I see Mr. Seagram writing, so we'll start with Mr. Miller and we'll come to you.
No, I was just...
Well, we have this Canadian Sustainable Generation Fund that focuses on skills development. But of course, you know, this is largely a provincial responsibility. So as federal agents, we have to act through the provinces. And part of the problem is that provinces, when they take on federal government programs, sometimes they take the money and they don't spend it on the issue at hand. And I think one of the things we have to do is to make sure that money is transferred under this program or any of the others on skills development. It must be spent on skills development because we are falling down, there's no question, in apprenticeships and skills development. My gosh, we bring in, we have to import immigrant skills because somehow we can't train them. Nothing wrong with immigrants, but the fact is why can't we train some people in Canada? Why are we going short on these high-tech skills, these apprenticeships?
Let's get Mr. Seagram to jump in on that.
And yes, no, the NDP supports strong apprenticeship training, and we're putting lots of money into that. As we say, we work with the province to negotiate the way in which it would work and be funded, but it has to be sustainable, and we have to get skills trade people out there working and get them supplied. I know how difficult it is. I've worked with College Heights Secondary School, for example. I'm working on getting those kids into co-ops and just begin that process and knowledge and know that they can work their way up and have different ways to access those skills. So we do that as well. Yep.
It's just got to be tough for the provinces. That's basically what it comes down to. We can fund it, but we got to be tough with the provinces.
Thank you to both of you for that. Our next exchange, and I'm happy to repeat the question, will be between Ms. Kovach and Mr. Longfield. And again, this is on skills development. According to the Guelph Business Expansion and Retention Survey, 69% of local manufacturers require enhanced employee training in order to expand. If elected, what will your party's strategy on skills development be? Let's begin with you, Mr. Longfield.
Well, it's my pleasure to be part of the strategy that we went to the businesses as part of Grow Guelph and looked at what is the need in the community, and skills training was a big need. The Liberal Party has a platform of $750 million a year going into skills development and training. It's part of our national skills strategy, and it's part of our fully costed program. $500 million for core, $200 million for people that wouldn't have qualified under previous, and $50 million, importantly, to First Nations. First Nations have been totally ignored. There are 30% less money going to First Nations for schools, and post-secondary, $50 million to help them at the university.
Let's get Ms. Kovach to jump in.
Well, the Conservative government will continue to invest in job training. We have been doing it. We'll continue to do it with $13 billion annually to support post-secondary education and skills training. We'll continue the Canada Job Grant to ensure Canadians are connected to the right jobs. One of the things you may know is that I'm a registered nurse by background, and one of the things that I also am committed to is foreign trained nurses and getting their certification in Canada to be able to work to provide them jobs when they're immigrating, and that's something that I do on my own.
Wasn't that the one that came out during the playoffs but didn't exist?
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Thank you, Ms. Kovach. I think something was drawn out there a little bit on recognition of foreign credentials, and that has immense value, I think, to this community. So we'll put another 30 seconds up on the board for that, because I think that's worth exploring. Ms. Kovach, you ended off on that, so we'll throw it to you, Mr. Longfield, so that the two of you can engage on this subject matter for 30 seconds each. Mr. Longfield, what would the party do, what would the Liberal Party do specifically on expediting the acceptance of foreign certification so that we can see skilled professionals jumping into the field faster than they are right now? To you, Mr. Longfield, for 30 seconds.
Working with organizations in Guelph such as Lutherwood to make sure that the certification process, as you said, is expedited. We have employers right now trying to get people into Canada, and it's taking months and sometimes years for that to happen. They need employees, they need them now, and they need to be accredited in Canada. And interprovincial accreditations where we don't have a national standard. You don't have any labor mobility within Canada, and that has to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Ms. Kovach.
Well, actually, I do agree with Lloyd on the interprovincial accreditation. I think it's unfortunate that we have standards in one province or territory that is different from another. So I think that that is something that we can talk about and work on. I think it's good for Canadians. But our government has been expediting bringing people in, and I've just shared with you my personal commitment in getting our healthcare up and going by getting properly accredited nurses trained to provide healthcare, good healthcare to Canadians.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Thank you, Mr. Longfield. We will now move on to the same question, because there is this skills development issue is pivotal to Guelph. But we've seen the Greens make a very specific commitment to zero tuition, and I haven't identified whether it's for both college and university.
It's both.
And you'll have the opportunity to tease that out. But why don't we engage in a specific exchange between what the key differences are between the Greens' approach to this on skills development, given how important it is here in Guelph, and the Liberal approach to this on skills development, and what the differences would be specifically on implementation. So we'll go for a minute 30 between the Greens and the Liberal Party, and we'll start with you, Mr. Miller, if you'd like.
Well, ours is clear policy. It's direct, and it is talking about elimination of tuition bond for both colleges and university and apprenticeship costs by 2020. Phase them out. But in the immediate term and in the short term is to eliminate student debt, because down to a cap of $10,000. Starting to forgive the debt down to $10,000. We'll make the students say, okay, here you face a $10,000 debt. That's what society is asking you to contribute. But the reality is, any more than that, society will pay the freight, because we can't send these students out burdened with this kind of debt into society.
Mr. Longfield, let's get you in there as well.
I think we're looking at policies that straddle federal and provincial. And I think the MTCU would weigh in on whether free tuition is a good idea or not, but I have talked to some members of provincial saying that that could result in smaller universities with lower class sizes, because that component of revenue would be taken away.
Let Mr. Longfield
so our specific would be looking at interest-free loans that cover not only tuition but living costs, and be flexibly repaid once jobs are achieved, instead of starting at 6 months as a fixed date.
Mr. Miller.
Well, yours are just ambitions, and ours is direct policy thing. It's the
province don't know anything about your policy.
No, Russ, but the provinces take the federal money by the hundreds of millions of dollars, and all it is putting a caveat on the federal money, and then you can have your agreeable provinces. There's no question that the University of Guelph gets all sorts of federal money, for example.
Thank you to the two of you for that. It looks like we do have some opportunity to tease this out a little bit, because there's talk about a lot of federal and provincial agreements here. We know that education is delivered provincially. It's administered provincially. Everything about the execution of education is both secondary and post-secondary is delivered provincially. Now, both of your parties have proposed a whole host of provincial agreements. Where would the skills development agreement fall within that massive framework? For you to zero rate tuition, you would need the provinces to be on board. And for the proposals that the Liberal Party has, particularly on skills development and apprenticeships, you would need the colleges on board and MTCU. So if we could put 30 seconds up there, and we'll start with you, Mr. Longfield. To what extent are you able to prioritize this within your provincial discussions? Because a lot of what your party is proposing requires provincial support.
Well, on this, I think we would be the sound of one hand clapping if we haven't got the provincial government together, the provincial governments and territorial governments together to talk about this. So our proposal is to bring together the ministers that are responsible, along with the federal government, to set a joint strategy and then to execute on that strategy. And not by 2020. We need to start that now. We need skills developed now.
We together, Elizabeth May said we bring together a council of governments.
Why don't we wait for a few minutes? You'll have your 30 seconds. Okay, you're seating. So 30 seconds to you, Mr. Miller, so that we can let's delve into the specifics associated with how you negotiate with the province, with the provinces, on the skills development piece. We're talking about direct
Absolutely.
delivery.
First of all, you asked what is the priority, and it is a very, very high priority because youth and the freeing the youth from this debt burden is very, very high priority for the Greens. But how we would do it, we would form a council of Canadian governments, not just the provinces and the territories and the federal government, but also the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit, to sit down and talk about how we handle these kind of things to get consistency across the country. Because the tuition, of course, varies tremendously across the country. Ontario happens to have the very highest tuition, so it's the biggest problem here. So we would find a way to work.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Longfield, for that discussion. We'll now move on to the NDP and the Conservatives on the same exact question. How do your policies differ? Again, that is, what specifically will you do to enhance employee training in order for companies to be able to expand? If elected, what is your party's strategy on skills development specifically? And we'll begin with you, Ms. Kovach.
Well, in skills development, we will be investing $100 million a year in the future of Canadian skilled workforce through our new Canadian apprenticeship loans. And starting in 2015, actually, we'll have tens of thousands of apprentices every year that will benefit from these loans. They're interest-free loans, and they run for the period of their technical training.
Mr. Seagram?
Yeah, well, the NDP is offering $100 million a year to create more than 40,000 jobs for paid internships and co-op placements. And as I say, we're also looking to take out unpaid internships in order to support youth actually getting paid. We're looking at supporting greater dollars into healthcare to support healthcare workers and to broaden, particularly for dementia and Alzheimer's, bring in millions of dollars of funding to support new workers in Alzheimer's and dementia. We're just going to continue to expand the economy. And one thing I just have to add, we're 400,000 jobs less now than we were 9 years ago under the Conservative government. So we can't trust that they're actually going to be able to build jobs.
Well, that's actually not true.
So it is true.
So you need to get your facts straight. And one of the reasons that we're having so much problem in Ontario with healthcare, and that's what you mentioned.
Because Stephen Harper gave up on manufacturing in Ontario.
No, actually it's not. It's because our...
I'm going to call time on that. I would like to you will have the opportunity to pursue this further, but we are going to have to move on to the next exchange, and that is the exchange between Mr. Longfield and Mr. Seagram on this issue as well. Both of your parties have proposed numerous proposals on this. Now let's dig deep into the actual policy specifics, both Mr. Seagram and Mr. Longfield, on how the two of your parties differ in this regard when it comes to skills development. And I can repeat the question if you'd like, but why don't we proceed? Sure. So according to the Guelph Business Retention and Expansion Survey, 69% of local manufacturers require enhanced employee training in order to expand. If elected, what will your party's strategy on skills development be? Over to you, Mr. Longfield.
I feel like I may be repeating myself, but we have stressed that we have a $750 million fund to go into skills development and training, that we would partner with the provinces, and the provinces would not have the opportunity to opt out the way that the NDP has. That if you get money for a program, it has to be spent on that program, and the province can determine within that program how it's allocated according to their needs and their priorities and the types of businesses within the communities in that province, but the money has to go to skills development. It won't go into something else.
Mr. Seagram, perhaps you can juxtapose how your party's policy
well, once
differs.
Again, we're talking about putting $100 million a year into skills development, into apprenticeships and co-ops. we're not giving anybody, aka the provinces, money with a blank check saying, oh, we hope you spend it nicely. The plan is, of course, is to go out and make sure it's directed to where we want it to be spent.
But Mr. Mulcair has talked about an opt-out provision for federal funding transfers between provinces and territories.
So what do you say to that, Mr. Seagram?
Well, it's not something, an opt-out from receiving the money, but not opting out from spending the money, from getting it.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We don't have enough time for Mr. Longfield to be able to respond. Would like to conclude with our final engagement on this particular subject matter. Of course, as you know, candidates, as we move throughout the debate, you're able to redirect your commentary to further clarify yourselves. And our last engagement is between the Conservatives and the Greens on this particular subject matter. I will repeat it for you so that you have it once more. So according to the Guelph Business Retention Expansion Survey, 69% of local manufacturers require enhanced employee training in order to expand. If elected, what is your party's strategy on skills development, and how does it differ from the candidate that you're about to engage in exchange?
We're beating this to death here. I think, I'm not sure the audience wants to hear any more about skills development. Let's talk about the fact that the economic base in Guelph is about manufacturing, about clean tech, about agriculture. And there's a big difference between the Greens and Conservatives on those topics. And they're obsessed about bitumen things. So I think we've beat the...
Mr. Miller, perhaps you might choose then to tease out what those differences are. Specific to manufacturing,
absolutely. If this economy is a bitumen economy, the price of our dollar goes way up, and manufacturing goes down, and clean technology goes down, and the future of this country is in agricultural, clean tech, and manufacturing. The future of the government of this city is in those same things, and we've got to realign the priorities of the national government to focus on that.
Okay. Well, why don't we go to Ms. Kovach then, if you'd like to be able to provide an offer. To what extent will your party focus on the manufacturing sector outside of the skills development? Because apparently we've given it some exhaustion. So on the manufacturing side, to what extent would you?
Well, actually, I'd like to go back to skilled trades and say what our policy, because you asked what it is that's the difference, and that again, we're investing $100 million. It is going to be an interest-free loan for the period of technical training. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think one of the things that brings it more local is that you're right, in Guelph businesses, and they've been discussing the need for skilled trades. And one of the big areas in Guelph that is outstanding is the York Road lands. And during my tenure on council, we were working...
Kovach, that's time.
Okay.
I want us to be able to move on to a new subject matter. We will now change up our engagement format. And that subject matter, of course, I know is particularly important to Guelph. You've talked about a number of our themes throughout your discussions. So something that we have not touched on, though, is pensions. So starting in 2023, the age of eligibility for old age security pension and benefits will increase from 65 to 67. What would you consider to be the long-term impact of this particular decision? Our first engagement on this subject matter is between the Liberals and the NDP. So I put that question to both you, Mr. Seagram, and you, Mr. Longfield, whoever would like to start.
The NDP will lower the age back down to 65 from 67. What will happen is it will cause poverty for our seniors. It'll take $13,000 a year out of people's lives. It's a draconian approach where Stephen Harper walked out one day at Dows and just said, we're just going to raise the age. And he promised not to do that. He promised not to impact pensions. So we would be out there, we would work with the provinces and coordinate a universal and broader pension plan scheme and find ways to raise pensions for people.
I think, and very correctly pointed out that this is an emerging issue that will only get more important as the years go by. The Liberal Party is also looking at restoring the pension or the eligibility from 67 back down to 65. We're looking at how the Harper government has balanced the books on the backs of seniors and veterans, and pensions is a big part of that. So pension reform, old age security increasing by 10% under the Liberals, and we're also looking at indexing pensions with a new seniors index that will allow the pensions to increase as cost of living increases.
Great. Anything to close on that, Mr. Seagram? Anything to add, Mr. Longfield?
No, just that we're going to reinstate the pension as it was, and then we're going to raise it for the future.
Thank you. That's time.
And the seniors, since we don't. They've paid into it, and they deserve better.
Ms. Longfield, we've concluded time. So the same question I put to the next candidates, and again, starting in April 2023, the age of eligibility for old age security pension and benefits will increase from 65 to 67. What would you consider to be the long-term impact of this decision? And our next engagement is the Conservatives and the Greens, Ms. Kovach and Mr. Miller. Over to you, Ms. Kovach, for you to kick us off.
Sure. The long-term effects of that would mean that everyone will be eligible for CPP. We're not going to run out of our pension fund money. People are living longer. That's a fact. One of the other things that we're doing is that to offset that, we've introduced income splitting for pensioners. That's a great thing. I'm being told at the doors that people really appreciate that. They're afraid that that might be taken away from them. And also the Conservative government introduced a $2,000 single seniors tax credit that will extend relief to nearly 1.6 million single or widowed seniors. We've also increased tax-free saving accounts.
And they took away the veterans' pensions. If you talk about something that's absolutely un-Canadian, is taking away the veterans' pensions, the one thing that Canadians have held dear to their hearts for many years.
Is your party committing to restore that, Mr. Miller? If we could juxtapose these two pension
Absolutely. My party is committed to restore veterans' pension and also realize there's nothing wrong with CPP. In fact, we think it's a viable pension plan and could be increased in size, but increasing contributions, and down the line give better pensions to Canadian retirees, because the Canada Pension Plan works and it's viable and it should be 65.
Ms. Kovach, your thoughts on that approach?
So I think when you're talking about veterans, we're extending veterans' earning loss benefits, and without altering their benefit payments. We have a new retirement income security benefit for veterans, as well as a critical injury benefit.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. That's time on that issue. We will now move into an engagement between the Liberals and the Conservatives on this issue. Both of you have differing approaches on pensions, of which we were quite interested to hear within the community what specifically those differences are. We will kick off, of course, because we finished with you, Ms. Kovach. Let's kick off with Mr. Longfield on this particular issue. What are the long-term impacts of moving age of eligibility from 67 to 65?
Ms. Kovach mentioned that some people at the door are afraid about the income splitting being removed, and the Liberal Party is not planning to remove income splitting for seniors. We are, however, removing income splitting for people over $150,000 that have children at home, which impacts about 15% of the Canadian population and costs us about $3.2 billion a year. The flexibility of pensions with the provinces is something that needs to be discussed. Provinces are going it alone in a vacuum and really needs to have the federal government part of that conversation.
Ms. Kovach.
Well, I mean, I think the real big difference here, and especially when we're talking about Liberal governments, I'm just appalled at listening to Kathleen Wynne, who you guys are working with at a federal level, and Lloyd, you paraded her through Guelph, even after she's proposing what they call job killer legislation. That's the Ontario Pension Plan. That is not my words. Those are not my words, Lloyd. Those are the words of the Canadian Federation of Business.
Yeah. She's developing it in a vacuum. She needs to have the federal government part of the conversation.
Well, she is in a vacuum. She lives in a vacuum, Lloyd.
That's because Harper doesn't talk to her.
Okay,
Harper doesn't talk to her because she's a Liberal.
Ms. Kovach, how would you respond to that? How would you respond to the engagement between the province and the feds on an important issue like pensions?
Oh, look it. Stephen Harper has sat down. There's pictures of the two of them together.
40 minutes.
She is very difficult to engage with. I mean, she's out campaigning with you, Lloyd. How can she sit down and?
That's time on that issue. And again, I remind I remind the audience of your commitment to a level of decorum, and I remind the candidates to their commitment of a level of decorum. So why don't we then close off this particular issue with an engagement between the NDP and the Greens. In what way does your policy on pensions differ?
I just need to add in something about Kathleen Wynne, though. Kathleen Wynne, and I'm not speaking proudly for the Liberals, but she tried repeatedly to meet with Stephen Harper over a period of years and years and years to discuss pension plans. And I know I'm supposed to be talking to Gord here, but, and you know, I'm not bolstering the Liberals, but they had to go alone because, and the NDP will work with the provinces immediately within 6 months and sit down and figure out pension plans in Canada.
So we'll
And kill jobs.
Yeah, let's look at this.
Kill people by not being able to eat when they're old.
Okay.
Why don't we make? Let's ensure that we're offering meaningful debate to the room that has come together. So let's make sure that we're having the engagement between Mr. Seagram and Mr. Miller. Go for it.
Okay, well, I think the whole question about pensions, you have to look at it in a bigger context. And that's why we're calling for a national senior strategy that includes more than pension reform. It includes affordable home care and an age-in-place policy so seniors can comfortably stay in their homes for a longer period of time and have access to transportation. So it's the whole package in a national seniors strategy that's important. Pensions are integral, of course, but that's how you have to look at the problem, and that's how the Greens look at the problem.
And we would bring in a $400 increase to the GIC for the most poor and the most needy.
Thank you to the two of you for that engagement. We're going to now move on to our audience-submitted questions. Thank you very much for doing extremely well on being able to be nimble in the themed part of our questions. But we're now going to move into the submitted questions, and I thank you to the audience for submitting a number of very good questions. And one of the questions that we will proceed with, as you know, each of you will have 30 seconds to be able to respond to this. And you'll have the chance to be able to offer a variety of thoughts. We are going to not necessarily maintain any specific order, but we will ensure that each of you receives your 30 seconds to be able to have a meaningful conversation and juxtapose other ideas that are offered on the floor. So we've talked a lot about how there is an interest in serving Guelph and bringing those ideas to Ottawa. So we've received a very good question that says, would you defy your party leadership if it was clear that the citizens of Guelph felt differently about an issue? And we will begin with Mr. Miller.
Well, no, I don't have to defy my party leadership. The Green is very clear. They don't whip votes, and they don't tell their other MPs how to represent their community. I am absolutely free as a Green MP to represent the people of Guelph. Elizabeth May and Bruce Heyer have actually voted differently on some things because they have different issues from their constituency. That is what the Green Party is about. No whipped votes. Represent your constituency in Ottawa like you're supposed to in the parliamentary system. It's unlike all the other parties.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Seagram.
I'm going to stand here and say on an active conscience, I could not vote for a war of choice like the war in Iraq. That would be about the only place. I understand that we are a whipped vote, and 90% of the policies that I would agree with, and 10% I would have to hold my nose, and the rest we'd have a discussion in caucus. But I'm going down on a limb here against policy, but yeah, I could not vote for a war of choice.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Mr. Longfield.
This is one of the most exciting parts of the real change agenda that Justin Trudeau is putting out, that parliamentarians will be able to speak on behalf of their communities with the exception of budget items and throne speech items which are discussed in caucus. And what Frank Valerian has done for this community to go to the Italian-Canadian Club, get ideas, go back to Ottawa is exactly what I want to keep doing.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. 30 seconds to you on that question, Ms. Kovach.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm well known in Guelph for speaking my mind, and I will continue to do that and represent the citizens. I'll be Guelph's voice to Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice to Guelph. It's really well known, and as I was president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I went around door to door, talked to the people of Guelph, and talked to other people throughout the country, made a pitch to the federal government, and I'm quite proud of my work there, quite proud of representing Guelph.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. We will move on to the next audience-submitted question, and that states, the knowledge-based economy is important for Guelph and Canada's future. What does a knowledge-based economy mean to you, and what steps would your party take to grow the knowledge-based economy? We will begin this round of audience-submitted questions with Mr. Seagram.
Well, we would continue to invest in innovation. We've got an innovation fund, and we would support the constant growth, constant support also of technological and ongoing technological change. We have the University of Guelph here, which we will be supporting and funding for broader public research. We would continue to support. We would free up scientists to be able to speak their minds.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Ms. Kovach, over to you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The knowledge-based economy is important for Guelph and Canada's future. What does the knowledge-based economy mean to you, and what steps would your party take to grow the knowledge economy?
Okay, well, a knowledge-based economy can be a variety of things. It can be anything from what we talked about exhaustively, the skills, trades, and our investment in technical training. It also is interesting. I had a meeting with the University of Guelph, and we had a really good discussion about what their needs are in research, and in particular agri-food. That was a very interesting discussion, and one that I have proudly shared with my colleagues in Ottawa.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Over to you, Mr. Longfield.
Knowledge-based economy in Guelph. We've got a new center called Innovation Guelph that looks at creating new businesses from knowledge. One of the key parts that we need is open data sharing, and the Liberal government would make open data available by default, unless otherwise, for security reasons, can't be. We'd also look at restoring the long-form census so we have data to work with.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Over to you, Mr. Miller, to close out this the subject matter.
Well, of course, the knowledge-based economy is a fact-based economy, and we need fact-based decision-making. Absolutely. We have a government that's been destroying scientific libraries, throwing the research into dumpsters, and muzzling the scientists. It's got to stop. I'm a scientist. I was trained at the University of Guelph as a scientist, and this is the future. This is how we are competitive in the world, because we chase down high technology, and this is what Guelph is good at. This is what our future is, and we've got to reverse the policies of the Harper government that has destroyed and set us back so much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So each of you has made some reference to food security and agribusiness. We won't be able to have trouble answering this particular question, and that is, what is your vision for developing Guelph as a hub for agribusiness? And we will begin that particular subject matter with Ms. Kovach.
Great. Actually, Guelph is a hub for agribusiness. We still have our farms in our community, and I am very proud of the work that I've done as a member of Guelph City Council for the last 24 years in promoting local food in local businesses, and I will continue that work. We are leaders in food security, and we're also the second largest contributor to the World Food Program when we're talking about food.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. We'll go to Mr. Seagram.
Well, we'd support, as I said, further research at the University of Guelph. We would support funding to a MAPRO through the provinces. I've worked in food security in Guelph for the last 10 years on the ground, helping local neighborhoods get food. There's 841,000 people that are going without food in Canada, so we have to stop that. We would support farmers, young farmers, with real dollars. We would give them insurance to cover them off in case of disaster.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram.
The lean times.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. We'll go to you, Mr. Longfield, on this particular subject matter, and would you like to hear that again?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Thanks. Guelph is so well positioned for this next economy. Look at the oil business in Alberta crashing, not coming back for another generation. Our next opportunity is food, feeding a hungry planet from Guelph. $47 billion a year, food and agriculture and food processing, larger than the automotive market. Guelph is perfectly positioned to take advantage, and I would love to be the Member of Parliament being in the center of all that.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. We will go with Mr. Miller.
Well, I agree. Guelph is the center of agriculture for Canada, and it is a tremendous opportunity. But we talked, the question was about agro-business, and there is a misbalance in this country. Big agro-business is doing very, very well. Small farms, small agro-business, entry-level farm, young people trying to get into farming, not doing so well. The Green Party specifically wants to rebalance that by creating opportunities for individuals to get into farms, small farms, community-based processing, microbreweries, this kind of technology. We want to open that up to balance things.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Given the importance of this particular subject matter for the community, I think we'll do one more round of a deeper dive on this. Each of you will have 30 seconds on this subject matter, because this did come from the audience, and I think it's important that we dig on specifics. A number of you spoke to, or some of you spoke to, commitments to the World Food Program, a commitment to small farms. What specific policy measures will your party bring forward that allow Guelph, that enable Guelph to be the hub of agribusiness? And we will begin this round this time with Mr. Seagram. You made some references to some specific areas that your party was demonstrating some leadership in. Let's dig into the specific policy proposals, and let's go for 30 seconds on this one.
We see a broad spectrum approach to dealing with agribusiness. We recognize that agribusiness is here to stay in the large corporations, but what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to support local farmers and local farming, and we need that technology coming out of the University of Guelph. We need that training and that mind frame. We're talking about putting actual insurance in to support new farmers so that in times of disaster relief, and we're talking about giving real funds and real money to help people buy farms.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram, on that subject matter. Ms. Kovach, same question to you on what enabling policy will allow Guelph to become the hub for agribusiness in Canada. Over to you for 30 seconds.
Well, I believe that Guelph is the hub for agribusiness in Canada. I mean, we have OMAFRA, we do a number of things in agri-food. I think one of the things that we need to be cognizant of as well is our free trade policies in place and enabling farmers, domestic farmers, to grow, take advantage of the global market. Dairy has grown by over 7% in the recent years. Very proud of that. And I can tell you that our government remains committed to defending our system of supply management.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. We will move to Mr. Miller on this particular subject matter. What specific proposals are you looking to introduce that would enable us to be leaders in the hub of agribusiness in Canada here in Guelph?
Well, just a quick comment. There's some farmers on Parliament Hill with cattle. They're not agreeing about your business on protecting supply management today, in fact. But what specific measures? Well, I've talked about support for small agriculture, small market, farmers markets, that kind of thing, but also shifting support of our research money that Ag Canada supports from mega GMO-type research and balance it out by more research into organic and sustainable food production and local food change and production change. We've got to rebalance this.
Thank you,
our
Mr.
food's
Miller.
Coming from too far away.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And over to you to close out this issue, Mr. Longfield.
Export development is the key to all of this. We've had 50 straight months of trade deficit. We're now at a $55 billion trade deficit in Canada. We used to be at a $15 billion trade surplus. We need to get our grain to market. The trade deals that Mr. Harper's developed are simply not working for Canada. We have to renegotiate and get our grain moving.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. That wonderfully dovetails into our next subject matter, because we're going to dig deep a little bit on foreign policy. And now this has been submitted from the audience, and it is, what is your party's position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement? What benefits will this position bring to Guelph? Benefits or negatives? That can be answered one way or the other. And we'll begin with you, Mr. Miller.
Well, the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal is not a trade deal. It's a sellout. It's not about trade. It's about empowering foreign multinational corporations to supersede the sovereignty of Canada. It's about them being able to sue us for our laws, our environmental and labor laws. It's absolutely wrong. It's about sacrificing our supply management and gutting our rural communities. That's what's going on, and he's trying to get it passed before the election. That's what they're trying to sign. The Trans-Pacific trade deal is a travesty,
Thank you,
and we've got to stop it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Over to you, Ms. Kovach. What is your party's position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, and what benefits will this position bring, or non-benefits bring to Guelph?
Sure. The TPP opens up new markets for Canada. It, without a free trade plan in place, our domestic farmers will be unable to take advantage of the global market. It's interesting that Lloyd finished off criticizing our trade, because he has sent me emails that is complimenting me. In fact, he said I was very astute with the points I made, and it opens markets for local jobs. He also talks about how our trade deals have lowered unemployment rates.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Thank you, Ms. Kovach.
Thank you, Lloyd.
We will go to Mr. Seagram.
The TPP will be a disaster for local people, for supply management. Dairy's already going to be thrown under the bus now. Stephen Harper. We entered into the TPP 1.5 years after it started. So a good chunk of it was already negotiated around culture, around other businesses. It is, as Lloyd said, a sellout, and it is what is going to be known as the final nail in the neocon agenda. It's what will finally have corporate control.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Over to you, Mr. Longfield, to close out on this issue.
Canada is a trading nation. The Liberal Party supports free trade. It's how we open ourselves to other markets. A comment I made a few years ago was that Europe, the EU deal, will open us up to a massive market for Canada, provided it's done in public with proper consultation to protect Canadian jobs. We shouldn't be afraid of opening into new markets. We should embrace that. But it can't be done at the expense of Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Let's dig a little bit deeper on foreign policy, because there's two really important areas for us to cover. We'll cover another piece on trade, but then we'll jump into our multilateralism and our place in the world. We'll go into another 30 seconds on foreign policy related to trade, and pose this question to you. An ambitious trade agenda is about more than just taking down barriers. Do you consider expanding our trade capacity important? How would your party strengthen Canada's diplomatic presence abroad and expand resources to support trade? Mr. Miller, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, Canada's always been a very active player in the international scene. We've lost a lot of our presence and our dignity in recent years because we've become a lackey of the American government. We've closed embassies. We've sold off embassies, in fact. And you know, I used to work with foreign consuls when I was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, and I saw over a 10-year, 12-year period how Canada's prestige internationally declined. And we've got to reverse that. We've got to restore ourselves to where we were, proud Canadians in the international community.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Longfield, over to you. I'm happy to repeat the question,
please,
if you'd like.
Thank you.
An ambitious trade agenda is about more than just taking down barriers. Do you consider expanding our trade capacity important? How would your party strengthen Canada's diplomatic presence abroad and expand resources to support trade?
Thank you for clarifying. Canada has to take advantage of our diversity in so many ways. Bringing people from around the world to Canada through our open door policies in the past, not worrying about terrorists behind every rock, not worrying about what might happen if we get the wrong people into the country. Those people are connected to countries we can deal with on a trade basis, back and forth, and we can support continents like Africa that we've entirely pulled out of that could use trade with Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Over to you, Ms. Kovach, and I'm happy to repeat the question should you wish.
No, Canada is the greatest country in the world. We're very prosperous. We're well known around the world. I do want to come back to the issue of automobiles because we've talked about agri-food, and Guelph is a large manufacturing community of automobiles as well. In fact, I don't know if you're aware, but 85% of the cars produced in Canada are actually exported. So for us, it's a good deal to expand the export of our vehicles. It's good for jobs in Guelph.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. To close out this issue, Mr. Seagram.
First of all, the TPP is going to kill the auto sector and jobs in Guelph.
Yes.
What's going to do, because of the limitations and the lowering of parts per vehicle needed, it's going to lower it. Canada, in order to get us back on track internationally, Canada has to have a reputation again that's accepted globally. We have to go out, it's about talks, it's about trade, it's about negotiating in above board where Canadians know what we're getting into. These are not trade deals. These are corporations shifting their money around and finding cheaper labor. This is not about workers.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. So we have talked a lot about the deal component, and that's of course important from a public policy perspective. I put it to you as candidates, how would your party's negotiation strategy differ, recognizing that in a negotiation you're not able to reveal elements of that negotiation? How does your party's negotiation strategy differ? What specific steps would you take to change the way trade deals are done should you disagree with the approach on trade deals? And so we'll do another round of 30 seconds on each of those. But let's speak specifically, because we hear a lot about it, specifically on the negotiation strategy. How would your approach differ, or perhaps you're willing to support the current approach? And of course, why don't we start with you for 30 seconds, Ms. Kovach?
Sure. I'd like to first start out by saying that the media reports on that Canada has made concessions with the TPP is absolutely false. Not true. There's no basis for that at all. And I think that we are doing really well in opening our trade agreements. What we don't need is high debt policies to kill jobs. We see that in Greece. We see what it's done to the economy there. That's what my colleagues are proposing. High debt policies will kill our jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Over to you, Mr. Seagram.
Greece is the perfect example of far too much international trade agreements having impacts on their economy, and the impact of the IMF in their impacting what they're doing. When Stephen Harper arrived in Ottawa, there were 5 trade deals. There's now 44 international trade deals, all done in secret. We don't know what they've been going on. We would negotiate openly. Yes, you'd have to have some, but we would be telling people, we'd be taking it to Parliament. There would be discussions around Canada about what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Over to you, Mr. Miller.
Well, to emphasize this point, we already have one trade deal in place people don't know. It's the FIPA. It's with the Chinese, and it was put in place, and it binds us for 30 years to a deal with Communist China where their state corporations can sue our country for compensation if we pass certain environmental laws or labor laws. And that was done not only in secret, it was done with Stephen Harper signing that, not even going to Parliament. Why the secrecy? Why can't we do this in the open? That's a real problem in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Over to you, Mr. Longfield.
Take a little different tack on this, that the provinces are sending delegations all the time. When I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, we worked with the ministry provincially that was setting up trade deals. We used to have a Team Canada approach, where the provinces would get together with the federal government, find out what the best strategy was to move forward based on the strengths of the regions, and use a collaborative approach to trade deals with the provinces and federal government doing what's best for Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. We'll continue on with our audience-submitted questions. So with respect to your community involvement to date, what programs and projects will you support for our growing senior population? I'll repeat that again. With respect to your community involvement to date, what programs and projects will you support for our growing senior population? Ms. Kovach, we'll start with you.
Well, I've been involved in this community for my entire life. I was born here, I was raised here. I think I've already spoken to the Conservative government. We'll introduce a $2,000 single seniors tax credit that will extend tax relief. I'm very proud of that because it's 1.6 million single and widowed seniors in Canada that will benefit from that. One of the things I'm also very proud of is Bill C-36, which is Protecting Canada Senior Act.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Mr. Longfield, over to you for 30 seconds.
Infrastructure funding announced by the Liberal Party going towards seniors' residence and care facilities would be something that we would be looking at. We have several seniors' residences here that are very much in need of repair, and infrastructure money could flow tomorrow to those. We also need to have a better pharmacare program that we would introduce into Guelph to help seniors with the cost of drugs and with the availability of medications.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Over to you, Mr. Seagram.
We're going to introduce a pharmacare program and begin that process by injecting hundreds of millions of dollars so that the federal government would be purchasing pharmaceuticals that make it much cheaper for seniors. We'll also be spending $1.8 billion over 4 years to help provinces bolster health care for seniors, and by expanding home care for 41,000. We create 50,000 more nursing beds and improve palliative care services. I guess that's my time.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Mr. Miller.
Well, what hasn't been mentioned yet is we propose a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians, which would bolster the seniors in the community and make sure they have enough money to get along. But more than that, it's really important to put in programs of home care programs and continuing care to keep seniors in their homes and keep them well and healthy. If a senior ends up in the hospital, it costs us thousands of dollars unnecessarily. It's about keeping them safe in their homes, being able to get out and move around the community, and that's what a national senior strategy will do.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. There was talk of pharmacare, and that's an important question, and so that leads into what's said here is that there are questions, there are issues, there is interest around a national pharmacare program. If elected, what would your party do to make medication more affordable for Canadians? I point to you. It is incumbent upon me to point to you that throughout the course of this debate, we have talked about agreements with the provinces on cap and trade, on trade policy, on skills development, on tuition, and now we're moving into another area where there is a great significance of involvement by the provinces, and some provinces themselves have even said they are disinterested in participating in a pharmacare program. Let's get into some specifics on how the implementation of a program of this nature would be extended, or what policy mechanisms your party would introduce to make medication more affordable for Canadians. We'll begin with Mr. Seagram.
Well, we see it as an evolution. So we would provide $2.6 billion over 4 years and work with the provinces to establish universal prescription drug coverage. We would aim to cut drug costs by 30% through bulk purchases. And we see it as an evolution because initially it would be the federal government that would be doing these bulk purchases and passing the savings on down. But then we would also be working with provinces over a period of time to bring in provincial pharmacare programs.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Ms. Kovach.
I can tell you this is really close to my heart as a registered nurse and somebody who works in the healthcare field. And one of the really disturbing things is that when you talk about overall healthcare, and I know that your question was specific to drugs, but without the fundamentals of healthcare, you can't just talk about giving people drugs. And I know that our government has increased transfers from $29 billion in 2006-07 to $47 billion in 2015, and that money has not flowed from the federal government through the provincial Liberal government for healthcare.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Mr. Longfield.
The Liberal Party is also saying that we need to have a bulk purchase with all provinces and the federal government for medications so we can get the quantities up and the benefits of scale. But we also have to reverse the transfer payment reductions from the Conservative government, where Paul Martin set up 6% transfers to the provinces. They're now 3% and phasing to 0. We have to get those transfers back up so that seniors can get the care they need.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Mr. Miller.
Well, we too support a pharmacare program, and I guess just sort of fill out the facts, it doesn't vary tremendously from my two colleagues on the other side, but the thing you have to understand about pharmacare, we can actually save a lot of money. Countries that have done this bulk buying have held these international pharmaceutical companies, held their feet to the fire, and they've got considerably cheaper pharmaceuticals. We had some recent events recently about pharmaceutical companies bumping the price of pharmaceuticals. You know the story. So this works. It's doable. It will save us $11 billion. We all should do it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We'll now move on to an additional question submitted by the audience. So each party has committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in one form or another through a variety of mechanisms. Can you outline how your party's plan reaches these targets while maximizing economic capacity? Mr. Longfield, we'll start with you.
Two-tiered question, 30 seconds go. We're looking at, first of all, a green infrastructure fund that is going to be $20 billion over the next 6 years to develop green infrastructure capacity through water treatment systems, alternate energy, things municipalities need to move their greenhouse gas emissions down. We're also looking at establishing a green fund to help with that whole. We're running out of time. I wish I could talk longer, which is usually what I do.
You know, this is of great importance. We'll do this in 2 parts. I put this to you, Ms. Kovach, for 30 seconds.
Well, I've already said we are the first government in Canada that actually has reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and we've done so while protecting the Canadian economy and Canadian jobs. The Liberals signed international agreements. They had no intention of complying with them. They're harming Canada's international reputation. Our government has actually reduced the emissions. Actually, the previous Liberal government under Paul Martin actually increased the greenhouse gas emissions after you signed it. And Lloyd, we do have a green municipal fund through FCM. It's $550 million.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Mr. Miller.
Okay, fee and dividend. Here's an example. You drive your car to Toronto, you commute long distance. You're alone in the car. You pay a fee on the gasoline. All of a sudden, you find 2 or 3 people to go with, you car share. Guess what? You pay more or less the same amount of gas, you're paying the same fee. But all of you get that dividend check, that money that's accumulated by the government and divided equally amongst Canadians. So right off the bat, everybody gets a benefit and has a strong financial incentive to do things like car share or change their purchasing.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Seagram, for 30 seconds.
the dividend check just gives them more money to buy more gas. I mean, that's the issue. Yeah, well, they will. We're headed into an oil-less economy, and that is the new economy. So a cap-and-trade system is just ahead of the curve in dealing with the reality of no emissions or lower emissions. If we don't deal with our emissions, I think we all know what the future holds. It's a very scary place. We have to stop at the 1.5 degrees if we can, and looks like we're going to hit 2. And without it, it's going to be calamity.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. So let's bring this issue home, because Guelph is a leader in a number of areas, whether it's water conservation, whether it's development of tactics at the local level to conserve energy. You know, we're home to one of the largest solar manufacturers in Canada, solar panel manufacturers in Canada. So you are speaking to a community that has embraced the green economy in a very fundamental way. So that leads us to think more through some very clear-cut specifics. When we talk about green jobs and the green economy, what specifically will your government do, will your party do to support this type of growth? Recognizing that each of you has 30 seconds on this, so perhaps you might want to stick to one key initiative that would be able to spur this type of growth, and what that key initiative would mean for Guelph. We'll start with you, Ms. Kovach.
Thank you very much. Well, our party has eliminated the production of coal-burning plants. We did that in 2012. We've also provided a $585 million eco-energy home retrofit program, so that will help benefit, as well as providing $400 million to support energy-efficient renovations. We've got the home tax credit that will also help stimulate with renovations to homes, and as well, my experience as a city councillor, I was developing the green energy plan.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Over to you, Mr. Seagram, for 30 seconds.
I just want to go back. There was a dip in emissions from Canada during Harper's reign. That was because of his first recession. So that's why things went down. The green, as I was saying, we are going into a world where we're going to have to live without oil. So Guelph is going to be a forefront in further solar panel development and further ways in which we can find sustainable oil or energy, and that we continue the growth in the economy. We work on conservation.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Mr. Miller, for 30 seconds.
Well, as Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, I had charge and I worked on climate change policy for 15 years. But the number one thing we can do, and it's in the Green Party policy, is to do a major program of retrofits for the built environment. By 2030, we want to retrofit all the existing buildings. That will not only save a whole lot of money on it and a whole lot of energy, it will reduce substantially a major source of greenhouse gases. The Conservatives had a retrofit policy. They canceled it. Remember that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Over to you, Mr. Longfield, for 30 seconds.
The most exciting opportunities we have in Guelph are two. One is the York lands, where we could develop a green center with environmental programs, with alternate energy programs, and partnering with the University of Guelph and Conestoga College. We've moved it from the municipality, brought in a partnership with the province. The federal government wasn't interested. We have to bring them to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. So we are now going to move on to one of our brief closing topics as we near towards the end of our debate. Again, thank you to all of you that submitted your questions. We've had some outstanding questions that have come forward. And that question is on infrastructure. Each of your parties has discussed infrastructure in one fashion or another. Infrastructure is particularly important to Guelph. Recognizing that each of you has 30 seconds, let's stick to the specifics on your commitment on infrastructure, and let's relate them directly back to our community. So as one of the fastest growing cities in Canada with one of the highest GDPs per capita, Guelph is an important economic engine. Ensuring its continued place as a generator of jobs and prosperity requires partnerships on vital infrastructure. Do you agree with this? How would your party address this challenge? We will begin with you, Mr. Miller.
Well, the key thing is, yes, we agree with that. Infrastructure is critically important. That's why we want to take $6.4 billion, 1% off the GST money, and commit it long-term to infrastructure. I used to work in this business. The biggest problem for a city engineer when he's trying to fix the infrastructure is he keeps having to apply for federal money because it goes from year to year. You need to have long-term commitments so people can plan ahead and they know they have infrastructure money and do long-term projects. That's the solution to this.
Mr. Seagram, over to you.
The NDP is committed to spending billions over many years in order to be able to support infrastructure building. We're crumbling at the seams, and the Conservatives have allowed it just to fall apart, and we will continue to build and support infrastructure spending. It's the backbone. It creates jobs, it creates industry, it creates innovation. We're willing to look at $160 million, as I said, for a 4-year fund for aerospace companies as well. So we're out there.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Mr. Longfield.
The NDP wants to introduce infrastructure funding in 4 years out. We need it now. The Liberal Party wants to invest $125 billion in infrastructure that includes green infrastructure, social infrastructure, and transit. Our transit plan is 4 times the current funding. Guelph needs transit locally, and we also need transit regionally. Try to get to Hamilton using transit. Doesn't work. Try to get to Kitchener using transit. Doesn't work. We need the municipality, province, and federal government to work together. Federal government's coming to the table first with $125 billion.
Ms. Kovach, over to you.
That's great. As the president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I did just that. I negotiated with the federal government, with our Conservative government, a sustainable infrastructure plan. That government has now doubled it, and they've indexed it. And what that means is, in the prior Liberal government, municipalities used to go cap in hand and say, please, we have infrastructure money. When we get it, we'd have to quickly spend it within a time frame. It wasn't sustainable, it wasn't planned, it wasn't efficient.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Again, it's always quite important to bring this home. Party leader walks into caucus. Well, I mean, I suppose at this point in time he would be Prime Minister, or she would be Prime Minister, I should say. So walks into caucus and says, hear about Guelph, 5th fastest growing jurisdiction in Canada. Give me your one project for infrastructure. Identify what would be your number one infrastructure ask to your party leader should they come to you with that type of proposal. We'll begin with you, Mr. Seagram.
Transit. We need to have a core of transit between to Toronto, as well as between Guelph and Kitchener. I was speaking to someone the other day who has a child on disability, and it takes 3 hours for that child to get to Conestoga College in Kitchener from Guelph. We have to find ways to be able to move people. It's the fuel-efficient way. It's the economical way. So it's consistently making better transit for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram. Mr. Longfield, over to you for 30 seconds.
Wouldn't hesitate. District Energy. 140 kilometers of pipe that will take waste heat from businesses and put it into a network that will heat and cool residential and businesses in Guelph. $220 million. We need federal help on this project. We need it now. There's a project coming from Bottrop, Germany, an example from Bottrop, Germany. We know how to do it. We have a new engineering company that we attracted to Guelph that knows how to do the engineering. We can create jobs around this. We can create them now.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Over to you, Ms. Kovach.
Well, it's interesting because you put it in a local perspective, and it was a pleasure for me to sit down earlier this week with our mayor and talk about what his needs are for Guelph. And I think it's important, and what I'm leading to, it's important to have collaboration among levels of government to know how to best serve the citizens of Guelph. And that's what I would be doing. What I'm hearing at the door is jobs, and I'll continue to go door to door and hear about what's important to people, and that would be my plan, to work together to create sustainable infrastructure funding.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Over to you, Mr. Miller.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Lloyd on this one. District energy is the big opportunity for Guelph. Guelph has a unique situation in that we can do a district energy project, and it's a large-sized city to make it work, and that is more important than just Guelph. If we do this, it means that all of Canada can see what can be done, what the potential for district energy is. And we have a lot of waste heat in Canada that the Europeans would laugh at us when they see how much energy we waste and the lack of opportunity that we let go. So district energy is the big initiative. It could make Guelph stay in the map.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We're now going to move into 1 minute of closing remarks, and we will begin with Mr. Longfield as we're going in reverse order.
Are we better off today than we were 10 years ago? The answer is no. Harper's abandoned veterans and seniors. He's increased our debt by $157 billion. He owns 24% of our national debt, and he's leaving it to the next generation to pay for it. I believe in representing the local voice, and I ask my colleagues again to stand up and commit to funding their campaign locally and not from Alberta or any other place. The voice of Guelph can't be bought. Conservatives tried last time to take Guelph by disrupting the voting process on robocalls, and they got convicted. I will work as hard as Frank Valeriat for Guelph to represent Guelph Heights as their voice in Ottawa. I humbly ask for your support and for your vote on October 19th. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and participating in the process tonight, and all the people at home that are participating. We need you out there. Voting polls are open right now on Woodlawn Road. Go and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Closing remarks. Mr. Miller for 1 minute.
Well, Lloyd, don't forget that Frank Valeria got fined for robocalls too last time. But it's clear to me, I've been on the door since July, and it's clear to me the majority of people don't want Mr. Harper returning as Prime Minister. And to them, I give this assurance with confidence. Mr. Harper will not be the Prime Minister when the dust settles on this election. There's going to be a minority government, and all three opposition leaders have indicated that they will not vote confidence for Mr. Harper to be in government. Likewise, Ms. Kovach is not going to be the MP for Guelph because of Harper's unpopularity, because of robocalls and other scandals. She hasn't got the necessary votes to win. The Liberals are presently ahead in Guelph, but the Greens are closing that gap. Our numbers show that only the Greens have the growth potential to beat the Liberals in Guelph. This is a red-green election. Please make your choice wisely. Vote Green and be proud.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Seagram, your closing remarks for 1 minute.
This has been a wonderful debate tonight, and once again, I thank everyone for coming out in the Chamber of Commerce and the Cutting Club. The Conservatives can't win in Guelph, so I go with that. So there's no need to vote for the Liberals out of strategic fear. And I'm telling you, I go door to door, and overwhelmingly, a majority of people are not voting for Stephen Harper. The Conservatives cannot get enough votes to win here. If you do vote Liberal, you will still have Bill C-51, you will still have environmental deregulation, you will have the TPP and other trade deals that leave Canadian sovereignty in the dust. The NDP will end Bill C-51. We will bring in proportional representation. We'll bring in Canada-wide daycare, and we will not sell our country out to other nations. Guelphites can vote for those who they want to represent them in Ottawa, and that's the NDP, because it's between the NDP and the Liberals, Gord. I'm sorry to tell you that.
We have something in common, Liberals.
Yeah. So anyways, that's what we're known for. Go out and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Seagram.
Very much.
That's time. Ms. Kovach, 1 minute, closing remarks.
Thank you. I've knocked on over 12,000 doors in Guelph, and I don't think anyone expects this to be unanimous. There has been a tremendous amount of passion on this stage tonight and throughout the audience. I don't think any one party has a monopoly on good ideas, but I do know that the Conservative Party has the proven track record. Now is not the time to divide our country. It is a time to unite our city. For 24 years, I have represented you, all of you. For 24 years, you have trusted me to make the best decisions for Guelph. And for 24 years, I've made this city stronger and safer. Guelph is a place where innovation blossoms. It's a place where families have opportunities to flourish. Canada is the most reputable and admired country in the world. We should all be proud of that. On Election Day, I'm asking you to put politics aside and vote for experience and leadership that's best for our city. I will bring the voice of Guelph to Ottawa.
Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Thank you, Ms. Kovach. Please join me in giving 2 rounds of applause. 1 round of applause to yourselves, and a round of applause to our candidates. What makes Guelph a great community to live in, to work in, to invest in, is the individuals that have populated the room today, and your commitment to seeing the democratic process unfold the way that it has. And I know that's what's made these 4 individuals that are up here choose to put themselves in front of you to be able to deliver that promise in Ottawa in one fashion or another. All of you have done something very important today in this participation. You have made Guelph a more democratic place by participating this way, offering questions, and getting to know the candidates in a more meaningful way and what they will do specifically for Guelph. With that, as the music plays me out, thank you to the Realtors Association, to the Cutton Club, and to Rogers TV for everything that you've done this evening. Thank you to all of you.